Eleanor shifted in her seat, the old armchair creaking under her weight. Shadows danced across the room, cast by the flickering fireplace. It was a beautiful house, her new home on Hawthorne Street, but it was old and full of secrets. She had only been living in the Victorian mansion for a week, and already she felt uneasy. The silence of the house was broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Each tick was a hammer blow to her nerves. Eleanor longed for the familiar comforts of her city apartment. But her work as a historical researcher had brought her here, to this small town with its whispering past. Little did she know, the past had a way of making itself heard. The first night it was a single knock, sharp and insistent, right at the stroke of midnight. Eleanor sat up in bed, her heart pounding. Had she imagined it? The next night it came again. 3 knocks this time. Eleanor crept out of bed and peered out the window. The street was deserted, bathed in the pale glow of the moon. On the 3rd night Eleanor was ready. She waited with bated breath as the grandfather clock chimed 12 times. Then it came, a rapid tattoo of knocks that sent chills down her spine. This time, she wouldn't ignore it. Eleanor threw on her robe and hurried down the stairs. As she reached the front door, she noticed something lying on the welcome mat, a plain white envelope with no address, just her name scrawled across it in elegant cursive. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, a single sheet of paper bore a cryptic message. "They don't believe me, but you will." Night after night the pattern continued. The knocks, the envelopes, each message a fragment of a story about a tragedy that had occurred in the house many years ago. A story that sent shivers down Eleanor's spine. One night the knocks came earlier than usual. Eleanor was already downstairs, her curiosity outweighing her fear. As the last knock echoed through the house, she flung open the door. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. Tall and gaunt, it was draped in a long, dark cloak that hid its face. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, the figure extended a hand. In its gloved fingers was another envelope. "You must tell their story," a voice rasped, barely audible above the wind. Eleanor stumbled back, dropping the envelope at her feet. When she looked up, the figure was gone. She was alone again, the only sound the beating of her own heart. She picked up the envelope and went back inside. This message was different. It was a plea. "Find the truth," it read, "before it's too late, for all of us." Later that night, as Eleanor lay in bed, she glanced at the antique mirror across the room. For a fleeting moment, she could have sworn she saw another face reflected there, a face that was not her own, a face contorted in silent agony. The next day, Eleanor began researching the history of the house in earnest. She pored over old newspapers and town records, searching for any mention of a tragedy. She learned that the house had once belonged to a wealthy family, but they had all died within a few years of each other. Accident, rumor had it. But why did the messages speak of disbelief? Days turned into weeks. The knocks continued, as did the cryptic messages. Each one added another piece to the puzzle, but the complete picture remained elusive. Eleanor felt like she was going mad. Was she really communicating with a ghost? Or was there a more rational explanation? She had to know the truth, even if it meant confronting her deepest fears. One evening, as Eleanor was examining the back of an old portrait, she felt something give way. The wall behind the painting moved slightly, revealing a narrow gap. She pushed harder and the wall swung inwards, revealing a hidden doorway. A secret room. Eleanor's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and excitement. This must be the key to the mystery. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was small and dusty, lit by a single shaft of moonlight from a small window. A musty smell hung in the air, the scent of decay and forgotten things. In the center of the room stood a wooden chest, its surface covered in carvings. As Eleanor approached the chest, she heard a sound behind her. She whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing in the doorway was a young woman, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "Who are you?" Eleanor gasped, her voice trembling. The woman didn't answer. She just pointed to the chest, her eyes pleading. "You must help them," she whispered, her voice hoarse and faint. "Before it's too late." Then, as quickly as she had appeared, the woman vanished. Eleanor was alone again, the echo of the woman's words ringing in her ears. Eleanor cautiously approached the chest. Its wooden surface was cold to the touch. She hesitated for a moment, then lifted the heavy lid. Suddenly, the room began to spin. The floor seemed to rise up to meet her. Eleanor cried out, reaching for something, anything, to steady herself. But there was nothing. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the face of the woman in the doorway. And this time, she was smiling. A cold, cruel smile that sent shivers down Eleanor's spine. Eleanor was trapped, but by whom, or what? Would anyone find her?